The heat that evening clung to Red Willow like a damp blanket, the kind of Midwest summer air that made even breathing feel heavy. St. Mark's Church stood at the edge of town, its white paint cracked and peeling, bells silent as the sun dipped below the trees. Inside, adults filled the pews for a late prayer service, while outside, 5 children lingered near the stone baptism pool, kicking pebbles and laughing, unaware that the night was already slipping away from them. The kids had been told to stay where they were. Parents assumed the church grounds were safe. After all, nothing bad ever happened at St. Mark's. The pool water reflected the orange glow of the church lights, rippling gently as cicadas screamed in the background. One of the boys dared another to touch the water, claiming it felt colder at night. A girl glanced toward the church doors, expecting an adult to come out any second, but the doors stayed closed longer than usual. As the prayer service stretched on, the laughter outside slowly faded. A passing neighbor later claimed he saw shadows moving near the pool, tall and uneven, stretching across the stone like they didn't belong to children. He thought nothing of it at the time. Red Willow was a place where people trusted what they were told, and ignored what they couldn't explain. The night swallowed small details without protest. When the service finally ended, parents stepped outside to gather their kids. Names were called once, then again, voices echoing off the church walls. Shoes lay scattered near the pool, one sock floating on the water's surface, slowly circling the drain. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away, just the hum of insects and the unsettling stillness where 5 children had been moments before. Police arrived within the hour, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, sweeping over the church grounds and nearby woods. Dogs were brought in, but the scent stopped cold at the edge of the baptism pool, as if the children had simply vanished into the stone itself. The church doors were locked from the inside, untouched, and the water in the pool remained perfectly calm, too calm for a place where something had clearly gone wrong. By sunrise, Red Willow was no longer the quiet town it had been the night before. Squad cars lined the church road, yellow tape cutting across the lawn where families usually gathered on Sundays. Detectives moved in and out of St. Mark's with notebooks and cameras, while parents waited nearby, hollow-eyed and silent. Every surface was photographed, every inch of ground examined, yet the church itself felt untouched, clean, orderly, almost protected by something unseen. Search dogs were led through the sanctuary, the hallways, and the narrow side rooms behind the altar. Their behavior unsettled even the seasoned handlers. The dogs whined, circled near the baptism pool, then refused to go closer. When forced, they pulled back hard on their leashes, noses pressed low, tails stiff. The scent trail stopped there, sharp and sudden, as if the children had ceased to exist beyond that point. The pastor gave his statement calmly, almost rehearsed. He insisted the children had left early, that he personally saw them walk toward the parking lot before prayers began. Several adults backed his story, though none could agree on the exact time. Investigators noticed small inconsistencies, but nothing solid enough to push further. Questioning a man of faith in Red Willow wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous to one's reputation. As days passed, the town closed ranks. Flyers disappeared from storefront windows. Whispers replaced conversations. Those who suggested the church might be involved were met with cold stares and slammed doors. Sunday services continued, pews packed tighter than ever, prayers louder, faces tense. It was as if faith itself was being used to drown out fear, layer by layer. Within months, leads dried up. Files were boxed and labeled unsolved. The baptism pool was cleaned, refilled, and blessed anew. Families were told to move on, to trust God's plan. But at night, some residents claimed they heard faint splashing sounds from the church grounds, even when no one was there, sounds that never made it into any official report. By 2025, St. Mark's Church looked older than the town around it. Cracks ran through the stone like veins, and the baptism pool, once the pride of the congregation, had gone unused for years. Attendance had dropped, donations dried up, and the decision to renovate came quietly, without ceremony. Few locals volunteered to help. Fewer still wanted to be present when work began near the pool. When workers started draining the baptism water, the process took longer than expected. The water level dropped inch by inch, revealing stains that hadn't been visible before, dark streaks clinging to the stone walls beneath the surface. At first, they assumed it was mineral buildup or decades of neglect. But as the pool emptied completely, the marks became impossible to ignore. Long, uneven lines stretched from the center of the pool toward the far wall, etched deep into the stone floor. They weren't random. They followed the same path, over and over, as if something heavy had been dragged while resisting. One worker ran his fingers along a groove and felt the stone worn smooth, polished by repetition. No baptism ritual could explain that. The foreman called for better lighting. Under harsh work lamps, the marks appeared older than the rest of the pool, layered beneath newer repairs. Someone had tried to hide them. Patched concrete, mismatched stone, careless paint jobs applied just thick enough to mask the damage. It was the kind of work done quickly, by someone who didn't expect anyone to look too closely. Work stopped that afternoon. The pool was left empty, lights still on, shadows stretching across the basin as the sun set outside. That night, the church's motion sensors triggered repeatedly, though security footage showed nothing moving. By morning, faint wet streaks had appeared again on the dry stone floor, following the same path as the drag marks, fresh, unmistakable, and leading toward the exact same wall. When authorities returned to St. Mark's, the atmosphere had shifted. This was no longer a routine renovation issue. It felt like a crime scene that had been waiting decades to breathe again. Engineers brought in ground-penetrating radar, rolling the device slowly across the empty baptism pool while officers watched in silence. The screen flickered, then revealed a dense, hollow shape beneath the stone. Too symmetrical to be natural, too deliberate to be accidental. Church records were pulled next, blueprints dating back nearly a century. There was no mention of any sublevel, no crawl space, no drainage chamber beneath the pool. Yet the scans showed a rectangular void, sealed off by thick concrete. Someone had gone out of their way to erase it from history. Investigators marked the exact wall the drag marks pointed toward, and the readings spiked there immediately. Breaking through took hours. The concrete was reinforced far beyond what building codes required, layered as if meant to resist discovery rather than water pressure. When the final section gave way, a rush of air escaped, stale, damp, and carrying a metallic odor that made several officers step back. It smelled like rust, rot, and something far older than the church itself. Flashlights cut into the darkness below, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into the earth. The steps were worn down the center, edges still sharp, suggesting frequent use by many feet over a long period of time. Rusted hooks lined the walls, some bent, some snapped clean off. The temperature dropped noticeably with each step, the air growing heavier, harder to breathe. At the bottom was a chamber no larger than a classroom. Chains lay coiled on the floor, bolted directly into the concrete. 5 small wooden chairs sat in a neat row, all facing a blank stone wall. The wall was carved with tally marks, dozens of them, cut deep and precise. Far more than 5. And mixed among the dust and debris were scraps of children's clothing, faded but unmistakable, pressed into corners like they had been shoved there in a hurry. Among the debris in the chamber, investigators almost missed it. Tucked behind one of the small wooden chairs was a leather-bound journal, swollen from moisture but carefully wrapped in oilcloth. The leather was cracked and darkened with age, its surface etched with faint symbols that didn't match any known church markings. When an officer lifted it, flakes of dried residue fell from the cover, and the smell of mildew mixed with something sharper, like old blood. The first pages were handwritten in neat, deliberate script, dated decades before 1999. The entries spoke of discipline, obedience, and purity, all framed in religious language that sounded comforting at first glance. But as the pages continued, the tone shifted. Words like cleansing, preparation, and descent appeared again and again. The writer described the baptism pool not as a place of renewal, but as a gateway, the veil between what is seen and what must remain below. Midway through the journal, the handwriting grew tighter, more frantic. Dates aligned disturbingly well with known disappearances from surrounding counties, cases that were never officially connected. The writer mentioned children by first name only, referring to them as offerings chosen for their innocence. Each entry ended with a symbol carved into the margin, the same symbol found faintly scratched into the chamber wall. One section was marked 1999. The entry was longer than the rest, describing 5 children brought to the pool after evening prayers. The writer noted their resistance, the sound of water sloshing, and the importance of dragging them quietly so as not to disturb the faithful above. The words were clinical, detached, as if describing routine maintenance rather than human lives. The final entry was dated 4 years later. The ink was darker, pressed hard into the page. It read, "They still hear the water. The chamber listens. The pool hides the doorway. God hears them better underground." There were no more dates after that, just several blank pages, all scratched through violently, as if the writer had tried to erase something that refused to disappear. The confession didn't come from an interrogation room or a witness stepping forward out of courage. It came from a hospital bed, under flickering fluorescent lights, where an elderly deacon named Harold Mills lay barely conscious. He had served at St. Mark's for over 40 years, attending every service, every baptism, every closed-door meeting. When news of the chamber reached him, his vitals spiked so sharply that nurses called his family in, assuming the worst. At first, he refused to speak. His eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, lips moving silently as if reciting prayers only he could hear. But when an investigator mentioned the baptism pool, his breathing changed. His hands began to shake, fingers clawing at the sheets. After a long pause, he whispered a single sentence that froze everyone in the room. "You drained it." Over the next hour, words spilled out in fragments. Harold admitted that for years he had heard sounds beneath the church, soft at first, like water sloshing against stone, then later like muffled crying. Whenever he asked about it, the pastor told him it was old pipes settling, the building adjusting to temperature changes. He said they were warned never to question what happened beneath the pool, never to enter the lower levels, never to drain the water completely. He confessed that after 1999, the sounds became more frequent. Late at night, during cleaning shifts or private prayers, he could feel vibrations under his feet. Once, he swore he heard a child's voice call out a name, his own. The next day, the pastor gathered the elders and reminded them that doubt was the devil's favorite tool. Harold said he stayed silent because everyone else did, and because silence was treated like loyalty. As the interview ended, Harold's voice dropped to a whisper again. He clutched the investigator's sleeve and said something that was not written into the official transcript. He claimed the chamber was never meant to be empty, that the rituals didn't stop with the 5 children. When asked what he meant, his eyes filled with tears as he muttered. Sometimes the water moved even when no one was baptizing, because something below was still alive. The case was declared closed within weeks of the discovery. Press conferences were held, statements carefully worded, and officials assured the public that the threat was gone. Evidence was catalogued, the chamber documented, and the remains of the 5 children were finally returned to their families. For the first time in 26 years, headstones appeared in the local cemetery, identical in size and shape, lined up beneath an old oak tree that overlooked the church. St. Mark's was shut down indefinitely. Heavy steel barriers sealed the baptism pool, and the chamber entrance was reinforced with fresh concrete. Warning signs were posted, security cameras installed, and patrol cars parked nearby at night. Yet workers assigned to monitor the site reported odd issues: malfunctioning cameras, unexplained moisture seeping through newly poured cement, and alarms triggered by movement where no movement should have been possible. Residents noticed changes too. The ground around the church never fully dried, even during the hottest days of summer. Children complained of nightmares involving water-filled rooms and stone stairs that went down forever. Some swore they could hear faint echoes after sunset, something between dripping water and slow breathing, carried on the wind when they passed the church grounds. During a final inspection before the site was officially abandoned, investigators found something that wasn't included in the public report. Near the sealed wall beneath the pool, fresh drag marks cut through the dust, lighter than the original ones, but unmistakably recent. The concrete showed shallow scratches, as if something had been pulled only partway before stopping. The church now stands empty, surrounded by fencing and silence. The baptism pool remains dry, yet maintenance logs note unexplained fluctuations in moisture readings beneath the floor. Locals say that on quiet nights, when the town seems asleep, a faint sound can still be heard beneath the stone, water shifting slowly, patiently, as if waiting for someone to open the door again. They say the case is closed. They say the church is sealed. They say the evil was buried deep beneath stone and concrete. But if that were true, why does the ground still sweat when the pool is dry? Why do the drag marks keep coming back? And why do the people of Red Willow still avoid that place after dark? Maybe the children were found. Maybe the names were written down. But some doors were never meant to be opened. And some chambers were never meant to be empty. Because if the water is listening, then something below is still waiting. And the next time the pool is filled, it might not be for baptism.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.